Welcome to the Charity Changemakers podcast, the show where we dive into the journeys, challenges and successes of the leaders shaping the sector today. Each episode I'll be sitting down with the senior charity leaders to hear their stories, uncover their insights and explore what it really takes to drive change today. And if you enjoy the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe, like and share to help us reach as many people as possible and showcase the incredible charities that are coming on the show. So whether you're a charity professional, a trustee, thinking about joining the sector or making that next step in your career, or just passionate about making an impact, then this podcast is for you. Let's get started. It's great to have you here today, Raakhi, on the Charity Changemakers podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, Adam, lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we feel like we're well into the swing of series 2 now as we get into episode 4. But with this series, we've tried to give people just the opportunity to quickly introduce themselves, give us a sort of a 1-minute overview of who you are and what you do.
Okay, so I'm Raakhi Shah. I'm the CEO of The Circle, which is a global feminist organisation. It's been going for nearly 17 years now, and it was founded by some incredible women, including the musician and activist Annie Lennox, Olivia Firth, who's an activist, Melanie Hall, who's one of the leading KCs in the country, and other extraordinary women to help vulnerable and marginalised women around the world. So I've been the CEO for the last 5 years and have been in the sector, international development sector, with large NGOs for around 20 years now.
Yeah, brilliant, great, and we're going to dive into some of that experience within the sector, and obviously how your route to becoming chief executive and the role that you're doing now. And we'll hear more about the Circle, I'm sure, as we talk. What we like to do at the start of these is we've got some quick fire questions. They've been picked by listeners of the show, and we're asking everybody that comes on the show the same 3 questions. It gives us a really interesting overview, an opportunity, a bit of an insight into you, and gets into to know you a little bit today. So the first question is, what are you listening to or reading at the moment?
I'm slowly reading 2 young kids. So I am reading Yellowface at the moment, which I'm sure lots of your listeners have probably read because it's been in the top 10, for a couple of years, which is great. I'm only halfway through. It's going slow reading. I think I started it before Christmas. So that's really interesting because it's a lot about cultural appropriation. Right. But one book I did really want to mention, because it's been in my mind really a lot this week, is The Bang Bang Club. I read it, probably over a decade more ago, but it recently came back to me because I was with one of our partners, Grace, from South Sudan, and she was talking about this really infamous picture of a young Sudanese child in the famine who was photographed with a vulture in the background. So some of your listeners might remember this photo. It's very iconic. And the photographer in it, Kevin Brown, is part of this book, The Bang Bang Club, and it talks about how photographers process what they see, particularly in conflict. And I thought it was quite pertinent to people listening, because how you process trauma or difficult circumstances, or when we're working in social justice. Yeah,
brilliant, great, lovely. That's a great recommendation for everyone to go and have a look at. So no, thank you for that. This next quickfire question, I really like this one. I've been thinking about this question for the last 4 weeks or so, and I'm still deliberating how I would answer it. So I appreciate putting you a little bit on the spot. But what is a quality that you had as a child, which you still have as an adult?
I actually had to go and ask my best friend about this, which I thought was it's good to have somebody else. But creativity was one of the things that they came back with. So definitely as a child, I had lots of different ideas. I am a creative. I like lots of ideas. But interestingly, there's another CEO, I can't remember who, that calls themselves a creative, who loves a spreadsheet. And I loved maths when I was younger and do like a spreadsheet.
Yes, right, okay. Oh, well, we might dive into a bit of that, and I guess that balance between, like you say, the detail and the big picture, the creativity, diving on down to the spreadsheet. And then, so final quick fire question for you: if you've got a completely free day, Raakhi, how are you spending it? What are you doing?
Very rare, but much needed. I couldn't have a day off probably without having a swim. I do love swimming, so we've got a really beautiful outdoor heated pool near to where we live, so that's a joy to always go there. A bit of spa time, probably. I do like eating nice food, not, Michelin star, but like having a nice lunch. So nice lunch with friends, probably a good walk. And then I am a little bit highbrow, lowbrow, so maybe some TV that does make me switch off.
Yes, yeah, no, that's absolutely. You got to get that balance with how you
Yeah.
spend that day. I mean, the outdoor swimming, that's all the rage, but the heated outdoor swimming, that
Oh yeah, I'm not a cold swimmer.
yeah, no, that sounds much better to me. Yeah, absolutely. But no, brilliant, lovely. Well, thank you for answering those. It's nice just to have that quick insight into guests that have come onto the show. Look, we start these off with this really broad question because I don't think we've had one answer that's ever been the same for anybody, and very rare that we find anybody who says, when I was growing up, I knew that I wanted to be a chief executive in the charity sector, or I knew I wanted to go work in the sector. So what was your route into the charity world? How did it start for you?
Definitely didn't start with wanting to be a CEO, so hopefully that's consistent with previous guests you've had. But I was really interested in social justice from kind of my teenage years. There's a lot going on in the world at that time. The Rwandan genocide was kind of happening. That was quite a pivotal moment. There were really big campaigns happening, like the Make Trade Fair campaign. So I went on to... I did sciences at A levels, but actually that was totally the wrong decision. And then at my degree level, went to do international development and politics, which I found incredibly fascinating. I also have quite a diverse background. My parents were born and brought up in Africa, in Kenya. Right. They've got Indian heritage. So my lens is kind of focused on those different areas as well, and obviously the UK. And then during my kind of university time, one of the organisations that always came up in a lot of my reading and research was Oxfam at the time. So my lens was really focused on wanting to work somewhere like that. And I was really lucky to get an internship at the time. I do have to say it was unpaid at the time, but thankfully that's changed across the sector. So I did a few months as an internship in the press office, ended up staying there at Oxfam for 7 years, moving through the internship to kind of assistant level, working with a lot of high profile people. I had a stint in the humanitarian department. I then led work with all their high profile supporters in the UK, which took me overseas quite a lot as well on field visits. And then after about 7 years, I moved to UNICEF. So I moved to the UN system, which is another, really fascinating place to be in the UN. So I was there for another 7-ish years. Again, kind of leading a team on their high-level supporters, both celebrities, politicians, business leaders, which touched upon all of those roles, sort of touched upon fundraising, campaigning, advocacy, all sorts of elements of an organisation. And I had a stint, secondment to work in Vietnam as their kind of chief of communications, doing a cover, took the family with me. So we had a really fascinating time over there. And then after my second maternity leave, I took the role as chief exec at the Circle, where I am now.
Yeah, fab. Okay, and we'll get to that. There's a lot. I guess that first 14 years of career working in two of the biggest, global charitable NGOs, international relief. Talk to me about the internship. How does that work? Because I don't think we've had anybody on the show that's gone through sort of a charity intern. Is that similar to things that we see in the commercial world, where you get experience in lots of different departments because of the size of Oxfam? It's got that opportunity to
well, I was hoping. So my last year of university, I'd seen the internship at Oxfam, and it was a year-long internship, and you kind of rotated 3 months in different departments, and it was paid. That would have been wonderful. And then by the time it came around to me wanting to apply and ready and excited, they turned it into just a 3-month voluntary, unpaid in one department, which was quite a significant change, but I still went for it. And not everyone could, because obviously if you need to have a part-time job, or you need to have support in some way. So it was a bit different, and there wasn't a guaranteed role after. So after the sort of 3 months I was there, I ended up being on kind of short-term contracts for different things. Significant stuff happened around that time. It's 2004, so the tsunami had happened. And so working in the press office at that time was so incredibly busy, but learnt so much. And then also a few months after that, it was the start of the Make Poverty History campaign, for those that remember it, which was extraordinary. So it was a really interesting, fascinating, at that age, to be across all of those huge initiatives and kind of emergencies in the world. Was really kind of key to learning a lot of things.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about that journey in Oxfam then. So press officer and then into a variety of different roles then over the 7 years that you were in there, because it sounded like by the time you were leaving there, obviously you were looking at, a fairly, big, obviously clearly a much bigger role within the life of the organisation.
Yeah, so I mean, most of the time was spent, the bulk of it was spent as the artist liaison manager, the lead for the UK. So working, as I mentioned, kind of with a number of kind of Oxfam's high profile supporters on different things, whether it was kind of working on their Oxfam Unwrapped, which is their kind of gift buying initiative, whether it was working on the G20 and taking high level people to, summits like that to advocate for fair wages, and Make Trade Fair was a huge campaign at the time. So a lot of it was spent kind of on different initiatives, but kind of utilising and leveraging high level support for those. And then I did have a stint, as I mentioned, in the humanitarian department, working across programme communications. I always thought I was going to be a field worker. When you finish doing international development, you think, right, I'm off to, and it's not like that. There's a huge kind of enabling system in organisations as well. So there are such varied roles within these types of organisations. So then I think I ended, 2012 before I moved on.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting when you fall into or start in one of those big organisations, and just the breadth of opportunity that comes with that, and I guess the opportunities that are there that you can grab them and take them and just get that experience within the sector, right?
Exactly, and you're, depending where you are in an organisation like that, it is interesting, because if you're in somewhere like the press office or the media or comms, you're working with all different departments, and maybe that's something that kind of people who want to get into the sector but not sure what department or area they want to get into need to think about, because actually when you go to somewhere like the humanitarian department, you're not so much working with the campaigns department. You are a bit, but you're not as much as, and the fundraising teams might not have been working as much with the campaigns team. So it's really fascinating being somewhere that kind of was the centre of all of those activations.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's just very interesting how those the bigger organisations can give people that opportunity to get that exposure to help progress in their career. And I guess what we see is for Oxfam, obviously people that are doing well in the roles that they can promote work from within. They give people that opportunity, invest in the individual. For someone who's then with them for like 7 years, as you say, and then lead on to the next opportunity at UNICEF. So tell us a little bit about the role there as well.
So at UNICEF, I was managing a much larger team, much bigger budgets, bringing in and supporting, up to £7 million worth of income. Not just, that wasn't direct donations from high-level supporters, but, it's sort of calculated at anything that kind of wouldn't have happened without their significant involvement. So, and UNICEF's known for how it works with its high-profile supporters, its ambassadors. It's got some of the biggest names in kind of the entertainment sports industry, from David Beckham to Michael Sheen to it's known for Soccer Aid as well. So working with the football industry through to the music entertainment side of things. So it's again really, really varied, and again took me overseas quite a lot. So I think throughout the Oxfam and kind of UNICEF periods, I've probably done over 30 field trips, right from Democratic Republic of Congo to Malawi to Guatemala, on a range of different issues, whether it's trying to highlight an emergency and what's happening after, whether it's kind of a typhoon or a hurricane, whether it's a conflict. I went to Lebanon and Jordan a number of times when the Syria crisis was, at its peak, and how those countries were taking in huge amounts of refugees. and then longer term kind of development issues that were happening as well. And obviously, it's an incredible privilege to be able to spend time with people who are doing extraordinary work on the front line. But I think there's a misconception from your friends and family that you're getting to travel and, oh, isn't it amazing? You get to go to all these countries. Well, actually, you're seeing such horrificness, and you're not there, absolutely not there on holiday. You're there to make a real difference, and it can be really traumatic in how you process that as well. And that's why it's sort of, I mentioned the Bang Bang Club as well, because for anyone who's trying to get into those sectors, understanding how you process what you see is really, really important.
And that sort of leads on to, I think I was thinking about the question about, well, how does that impact your life when you come back here? Because I think, my experience of being overseas and, in various places has been nowhere near the experience that you've had, or seen the traumas that you've seen. But, at times, I go back to my gap year when I was, spent, 9 months in Calcutta, 20 odd years ago, working with people living on the streets, education, that type of work, and the impact that had on me, but not seeing people in, great trauma or, difficult circumstances or responding to natural crises. How does it impact you in that? Particularly when you talk about so many trips and you're seeing so many exposure to so many different things in so many different parts of the world. How do you process that, and what impact?
I think it impacts everyone differently, like anything. But for me personally, number one, it galvanizes me to do more. That's the number one thing. I always come back and think, right, how are we going to enact change from what we've, not only what we're doing from that trip, but furthering that. I think it's also making sure you've had time to kind of rest and recuperate, because they can be incredibly draining as well. So that well-being aspect's really, really important. I think I've absolutely learned that over the years, when we've got peak periods, to go really hard and fast and then know when to stop and kind of take that moment. I think it's really important for everyone, because you can't run on empty. But number one is kind of wanting to make that change. You owe it to the people that you've been to partner with and see what they're going through. So that's key.
And I suppose within the organisations that you've worked with, then to tell their story, right, and to try and garner that support.
Exactly, and that's it. And I think everywhere, which we've talked about my Oxfam and then my UNICEF, and I'm sure we're going to come onto the circle. But I think why particularly the circle resonates, because of everything I saw through all those other trips with other organisations, was that women and girls were always at the heart of what's the worst and first affected. You always saw women there, but interestingly, you always saw women and stories sitting in circles wherever you go, in groups, and whether they're kind of galvanizing each other or supporting each other. It's a really powerful thing that happens across the world. And I was involved in the early days of when the circle was set up, which was incubated within Oxfam actually during my period there, and then came back as the CEO. So there's a thread that runs throughout from those very beginning to now as well.
Well, tell us, we're at the right moment. Tell us a little bit about the circle, about the organisation, what it does, and the work that it's doing.
Well, it's a perfect time because we have just had International Women's Day. So, that's always a pivotal moment for any women's rights organisation. So the organisation I mentioned was founded 17-ish years ago, working with most vulnerable and marginalised women around the world. Over the last 5 years, we've done a lot to kind of really streamline and focus our impact. And so the two kind of key areas that organisation we focus on is around ending violence and economic empowerment. So 1 in 3 women around the world will still face violence in their lifetime, a stat that hasn't shifted for decades, and over 700 million women around the world will live in extreme poverty. So those two intersections of international development and women's rights come together at the circle. So that's kind of the need, is that we're on a mission to change that. Women should not be living in fear of their lives and safety. And so what we do as an organisation is fund and support women-led grassroots organisations. We do not go in and set up our own programmes. Hopefully we're on the front foot of all the discussions that's been happening in the sector. We're very locally led. So we've got at the moment 12 partners in 11 countries, right from South Sudan to Rwanda to Sri Lanka, and we've got one in the UK. So given kind of funding and also lots of non-financial support, amplification, platforms to have visibility. So that's our very local impacts that we're doing. And then we've got our kind of global aspect. We do a lot of advocacy work, focused on those two thematic areas. So for as example, under the economic justice part of it, we are advocating for a living wage for garment workers. So 80% of the global garment workforce is women on very poverty wages. So we're on a mission to kind of change that. And then we are scoping at the moment and looking at a new project around justice for survivors of sexual violence. And why it's called The Circle. So it's such a beautiful name that it was all about the solidarity between kind of women and sisterhood, and, you know, women who have, I guess, a much more being able to support their fellow women around the world who may not have those safety nets in very vulnerable positions. And at the very heart of everything, we've kind of moved to this notion of global feminism in solidarity and action, wanting to be much more inclusive as a women's rights organisation, welcoming everybody to be part of the journey, including men. We definitely want male allies along the way. And we're very lucky that we've been founded by some extraordinary women and have brilliant other women along that. So Annie Lennox, who is a long-standing activist in women's rights, she's just finished and brought together the most extraordinary concert at the Royal Albert Hall a couple of weeks ago called Sisters. It was a sellout in less than 15 minutes, and raised kind of vital funds for our work. And
you say The Circle was sort of incubated within Oxfam, but then it was obviously become its own entity. Is that right?
Yeah. So Annie's an ambassador for Oxfam and other organisations, and herself having travelled to various projects around the world, and again seeing women at the heart of all of it, felt very galvanised to kind of help make change. And around that time, there weren't significant number of global women's rights organisations in the UK. And now gender justice is at the heart of a lot of NGOs. So it felt a very exciting time to be able to kind of make an impact. And over the last 17 years, we've supported 1.4 million people on women's rights. And in the last year, we've managed to increase our impact 20-fold. We've supported 88,000 women and girls directly through our grassroots partners. It's not an easy time in the sector at all. It's not an easy time in the world. It's very, very turbulent. We've managed to keep our funding stable, increase it at times, but events like Sisters at the Royal Albert Hall and being a bit more innovative in utilising and partnering with some of our high-level supporters or other sectors like the music industry has been really, really important.
I guess for many that innovation around fundraising and that diversification of funds has been so critical over the last few years, and like you say, will continue to be so. So it's really interesting to hear those those types of things that have worked for you. And I mean, the numbers of people are obviously lives that have been impacted by the work that you're doing, with your partners on the ground, and that growth that you've had over the last few years. I guess you're continuing to see, sadly, increased demand, right? It's not that this is a challenge or a problem that's going away. I mean, what are the opportunities that are ahead for you as an organisation?
I mean, the need is greater than ever before because of what's happening in the world and the rise in kind of populist governments, the rollback of women's rights. We've been seeing a huge amount of funding, I mean, billions channeled into anti-rights movements. So there's a statistic that something like 6.8 billion has been channeled into anti-rights over the last 10 years versus 800 million into women's rights. And if that's the kind of balance you're working in, it's kind of really difficult context. So for us, it's really about mobilising more funds, because we need to make that balance and work. So mobilising more funds into the women's rights movement is critical for us. Obviously, it's at a time when government funding is being cut in countries that were traditionally really supportive of international development and women's rights. So the Dutch, the British. So, we recently had a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, to talk about the UK aid cuts. And, we all thought it was going to go from 0.5% to up to 0.7%. And actually, it's gone back down to 0.3%, the lowest in decades. So for us, that's a really big motivation. And ensuring that, we've got a notion that 50% of our funding goes to grassroots organisations, women-led grassroots organisations, because we know that the stronger they are, not only are they delivering what they want to through their programmes, but having really strong women's rights movements in a country, the evidence is then that changes things much stronger than anything else. So our theory of change through that is hopefully well honed, and that we're on a mission to kind of increase that even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And people listening might be the first time that they're hearing from you, hearing about the Circle. If they want to find out more, where do they go, or they want to get involved? How can they? How can someone listening to this help support the organisation?
Well, absolutely go to our website, thecircle.ngo. We had a good rebrand a couple of years ago, which I'm sure other people listening to this podcast have been through as well. But it's got our impact report on there. It's got a great kind of 3-minute film of kind of what we do and kind of the impact we've made, which is a really great summary. But definitely, if anyone's listening and wants to kind of get more involved, join us. We ask people to join us as a change maker, because everyone can do something, whether it is take an action, a small donation, open up their network. But we are called the Circle. We want more and more people to join us. It is a movement. So do that, please. We'd love to welcome you. We've got various events that we do throughout the year as well. So people might be on different stages of their journey about learning about these issues. Some might have been, feminists for years. Others might be like, actually, I just want to learn more. I don't really know where we are at the moment. So we've got lots of resources on our website, but we also do various events. So lunch and learns with our partners on the ground. We've got high-profile speakers. Recently, we've had the former Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard, speak, and then the author Bernardine Evaristo. And we always make sure that they are alongside one of our partners from the ground. So you're kind of, we're giving them the platform as well.
Yes. Yeah. Brilliant. No, that's great. Excellent. Well, that's lovely to hear, and lots of opportunities to get involved, which is great. And look, I guess part of this podcast is about reflecting on your journey, and we've not really talked about that step into a chief executive role and how that came about. I guess from whether from seeing that first advert or first hearing about the role. What did that kind of look like? Because I guess what we still see across the sector is not many women making that step, more men in leadership roles within the charity sector. Across the charity sector, more women employed by the sector, but when it comes to those senior leadership roles, more men. So I'd be interested to hear about that journey and that confidence to take that step, and what the motivation, the challenges, the opportunities that came with that.
I mean, I think the number one thing was that I knew the Circle a little bit from the early days. And so when they were recruiting for a chief executive, I sort of instantly knew this was an organisation that I was very fond of, had huge potential. It'd done extraordinary things, but there was such a to be able to grasp it and take it to the next level was very exciting, and a personal passion, of course, for the cause was kind of the main thing. I'd also kind of finished my second maternity leave. I'd been at big NGOs, Oxfam and UNICEF for, coming up to 15 years. And I felt like it was time to do something different. And I mean, not be somewhere so big as well. Yeah. And the opportunity to take on the responsibility didn't actually faze me. That was exciting. And when I look back, it's not an obvious career move from working with lots of high profile people to going to a CEO role. But actually, it does lend itself quite naturally because you've worked across so many different departments, and a CEO role does have that. So it needs to have an eye across all of those elements. So that bit didn't faze me. I was kind of, had been in tune with, advocacy campaigns and fundraising and working with someone high profile, that was very at ease with that. So that part of it came naturally. Obviously, the challenging part was that it was my first CEO role and it started during COVID. I took the role the first week of the pandemic, of going into lockdown. It was a remote role anyway before the pandemic, which was great as an organisation to be kind of at the forefront of that. So that was challenging, but it also did mean that we could think innovatively and creatively, suppose maybe quicker than we would in a normal circumstance. So it meant things like we launched our first global fundraising appeal, in the organisation's history, that brought together all the elements of our partners onto one portfolio. We were able to try different kind of online events, some of which we've kept ongoing and then had to adapt others. So I think also, when you work particularly have worked in humanitarian situations, you're not afraid, hopefully, to take the risk and be agile. That also lends itself because it's a very responsive notion that you've got to have.
Yeah. And are the things that along, as you reflect on your career or, I don't know, people or qualification, are the things that have, or mentors, I don't know what it might be, that have helped you, I guess, in that development of your career and to be able to, the progression that you've made and the steps that you've taken, are the things that have been there supporting along the way?
Definitely had a really great network of, I guess, one step up of the next level to you, or the steps up that are close friends, and I've always been able to ask them, and they've been incredibly supportive when I've needed advice. Similarly, when I took this role, I was taken on as part of the Akivo kind of new CEO Women of Colour cohort. There's lots of elements to it.
Quite a long title,
Quite a long title. So it was brilliant being with other kind of women who are first-time CEOs and getting some advice and experience from others along that journey. Definitely, I think, prior to that, this comment was really, when I went overseas, just gives you a different perspective. And then most recently, last summer, I was able to go to Harvard for a week to do their strategic leadership and kind of not-for-profit management course, which to be with sort of 230 leaders in social justice from around the world, just having a week talking about leadership and strategy was extraordinary. So being able to take that time out, which is really difficult when you're a CEO, or in any job, frankly. But it was really, really important and really invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's that network, those connections for that ongoing peer-to-peer support and learning that becomes so invaluable.
Yeah, and I think it is hard to carve out time and to kind of form, other relationships with other CEOs. But I do think it's really, really vital to have that peer support and that skill sharing. Probably beats any training you could go on, formal training.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And you talked obviously about the Circle being a remote organisation. I think it's one of those challenges that we speak to organisations all of the time about now, from organisations that, pre-pandemic were very office-based organisations, and are now in this struggle as to, are we remote, are we hybrid, are we going back to what does that kind of look like? Always interested when it's an organisation that's sort of set up to work in that way, and particularly about how you, obviously your delivery of service and working with partners around the world as well. How do you keep a team motivated and the culture of the organisation positive and collaborative and working and all pulling in that same direction?
We had the opposite when you were talking about people have had to have that discussion about going back into the office. We had the opposite of having started remote, always being remote pre-pandemic. What do people want going forward? And actually we found a really nice balance at the moment that we meet as a full team once a month, and then additionally as an SLT kind of once a month as well. So I'm in London for those meetings every 2 weeks. And we've got 2 global law firms who give us beautiful office space for that time, which is a real treat. And so that works really well. So we've kind of checked in with the team if that's good. Do they want to be in more? It was like, definitely don't want to be in every week. We collaborate over Teams. We're always in discussion with each other. We put in kind of informal coffees every week to make sure we've got that connection. We do achievements kind of as part of our team meeting every week. We have very open and honest discussions, especially kind of after big activations or events. So we just yesterday did a 2-hour session on International Women's Day and the concerts, and we've also had really great celebratory moments. We had a lovely lunch when our founder Annie was in London a couple of weeks ago, just really informal, really lovely to have everyone together to thank the team for all their extraordinary work. So, but it's never without your challenges. When you're a small organisation wanting to achieve impact, how do you balance that limited resource you've got with the stretch that you're trying to get to a different place? That's always the part in my mind of trying to get that balance right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really helpful. I think, people are, like I say, we're talking to people all of the time, charities, organisations, and thinking about that, about how you get that balance, how you get that culture, because it's those connections that can be lost. But it sounds like you've got a really nice balance of creating that space, both online and obviously in person for the team, and building that relationship together. And I guess, really united, clearly motivated individuals behind the work that you're doing globally, and the partnerships. And the impact, the huge impact obviously the organisation is having, which is, phenomenal. So,
well, we're trying our best. As I say, it's not easy in the world. And, when we had our partner Grace Durong from South Sudan over for a week to come and spend kind of the International Women's Day period for us, which was incredible. And there was so many opportunities. Like, she flew in straight to Parliament to talk about the aid cuts, and kind of met with Guardian and has done lots of other things. But, at the end of the week, the reality hits home. She said, I rang my daughter this morning and she said she could hear gunfire in the background. So you cannot lose sight of, yes, we've had a week of really brilliant, somewhat glitzy events, but they're all grounding ourselves in the purpose, and what's the reality on the ground is something that no team or CEO certainly should lose sight of.
No. And presumably that's the motivation that gives you the fire in the belly to get up each day to do the job that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, really, for me, it really is. And staying connected and hearing what's going on, and knowing that I've kind of tried really hard with a brilliant board to put in place what impact we can make, and staying truthful to that has been really key.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you strike that balance for you personally of, someone with that creative flair, that wanting to be, seeing programs being out on the front line and alongside people, right through to, I guess, we reflect as at year ends. You've been down in the budget spreadsheet, I suspect, for the last few weeks, signing off, getting ready for the next year. Yeah, all of those different things. How do you strike that balance between the two?
Between the two, there's many hats.
Well,
Between
okay,
the 10, 20.
forgive me. Yeah, that's right, indeed. Between the infinite amount of different things that you're juggling.
It's certainly not a dull moment, but I like it. I like that there's different parts, and it's just, when you start your week, being really clear about what your priorities are and what you're not going to be able to do, and looking forward onto that. So I know right now it's about our end of quarter board papers, it's the wrap up of the financial year, as you say, it's getting all the last funds over the line. It's not about doing more events now. Like we don't have the capacity for that. We've had that period, and then it's looking forward really clearly to the upcoming financial year. But I hate to say I don't find it easy because there's so much going on. But that switching between different things is energizing. But I try and always start my mornings off with a good few hours really focusing on the deep stuff, or like a big often the stuff you're putting off, starting the day with that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. That's probably really helpful advice for the people that are listening as well. When
we're all trying to put stuff off, but if you can keep your diary clear for that kind of stuff, because you're inevitably going to get sucked into emails and crises and approvals, all of that. That's throughout the day. So if you can manage that at least, I think it's really important.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, me just closing my Outlook in those moments as well, and the team knowing that probably I'm not going to see any emails until I'm going to switch it back on at lunchtime, because I'm really focusing on this particular project or whatever it is that that you've got going on. Try and turn off those distractions is really important.
Well, I think even when we had this really busy week of 6 events and media interviews and all sorts going on, I actually said to all my friends and family, I'm turning off notifications on WhatsApp completely for a week. So I just didn't respond to any of that, obviously, unless it was my children and my other half, which is really, I just didn't respond to anyone else. So you can do that on the flip side if you're able to, and it's not possible for everybody. But that was really, really helpful to not have that those distractions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. You getting that balance between work life and work and life, personal life, but also being able to put those boundaries up with friends and family as well, to say, well, look, I know this is going to be a really intense week. I'll be in touch later in the month type
they know when International Women's Day comes, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot going on. Yeah, absolutely. Raakhi, I could keep talking to you for many hours, but I'm conscious of time and probably needing to come into land. If I could finish with one more question, as we've talked about your career and the journey that you've been on, if you could go back now and talk to yourself, I guess, as you were potentially starting that internship, or maybe at university, give yourself one piece of advice, or you could tell yourself one thing, what do you think that would be?
I would say it's okay to not have it set in sight, like one trajectory of a journey throughout whatever career you're having. That it's okay to kind of have a wiggly or different perspectives or different experiences in different departments, and you'll find where you need to go to. Because I think there's a lot of pressure when you're younger to know immediately what you're going to do. If you know your interests or what motivates you, there's different areas within that you can kind of find out more about. So I'd say try different things if you can, and you will find your bit that really motivates you and you can make a difference in.
Brilliant. Raakhi, that's been really, really helpful. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story of that wiggly career journey and the opportunities that the sector has given to you, and the investment that I guess that it's put in you and seen you grow through that through your career and to where you are now, and the incredible work that you're doing and the impact that the circle are having globally is great to have shared. Obviously, we'll put some links in the show notes so that people can come through to the website to find out more and how they can get involved. But Raakhi, thank you so much for coming on the Charity Changemakers podcast, and it's been great to hear from you.
It's brilliant to have been on. Thanks a lot, Adam.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Charity Changemakers podcast. I hope you've been inspired by the incredible work being done across the charity sector. And this episode is proudly brought to you by my business, Charisma Charity Recruitment. We are passionate about delivering top-tier recruitment services to the charity sector that we care so much about. If your organisation is looking for expert support, then we'd love to help. Please do get in touch today. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please leave a review and don't forget to subscribe, like and share because it helps us reach more people and showcase the amazing charities that come on the show. And for more episodes, please visit our website, charismarecruitment.co.uk. So until next time, keep change making.